Hi, and welcome to another Rigonomicon.com video. Today we're talking about Unreal for Maya users, and it's going to be a walkthrough. So if you're not familiar with what a walkthrough is, it's kind of like you're just sitting next to me and I'm just showing you some things. And I find that's a good way to learn stuff and to spread information as best as possible. So if you are somebody who is struggling right now with Unreal, being a Maya user, and you're not too sure how stuff works. Hopefully this video will be able to help you out. It's going to be broken up into multiple parts. This is primarily a video for my students that are having a little bit of trouble using Unreal to render their final films. And the first part of this video is going to be talking about things that are non-technical. It's going to be more about perspective and bias in general that some teachers might have, and some ideas and expectations that might have been formed as a result of that. So, believe it or not, the very first part can be handy for anybody. When you recognize the issue at hand that I'm referring to in that first section, a lot of things start to make sense, and a lot of things start to fall into place. So it's if you're having trouble with with Unreal from Maya, then this is definitely something that could help you out, and most likely it is the source of much of your irritation. The other two sections are going to be more about just getting our minds, just wrapping our minds around how assets exist in Unreal, how to get things into Unreal in a way that's reliable and that's been tested over years and years of use. It's not a good idea to bring in things that are like still a little bit fresh and kind of contrary to the Unreal pipeline and architecture. Like I'm referring to USD files and things like that. Also, if you're going to be using stuff like Alembic, I suggest strongly to use Alembic only for vertex animation, like things like cloth simulation, particles, and that kind of stuff. And that's not something you necessarily need for if you're using Unreal from the rendering side. Somebody that might be coming in to see this video might be people that are in the movie industry and have discovered that large companies are starting to use Unreal for real-time green screens, basically. These green screens are not green. They have a render, actually, of what is going to be in the final shot of their show. And it's being used now widely by Disney, especially for all their Disney Plus TV shows that have a lot of special effects. So it's a very effective means of doing green screens. Okay, so the next thing that I'm also going to talk about is basically setting up or at least getting Maya to communicate with Unreal. And that's the final section at the very end. And we're going to bring in cameras, and we're going to make it so that what we have in Maya is the same as what we have in Unreal as far as cameras go. And I'm going to show the basic idea of how to do basically layout and have your shots make sense, and also just avoid things that cause irritation between the two, like communication between the two softwares. Okay, so first I'm going to show what I call a DCC pipeline. If you are somebody who is having trouble with Unreal in particular as a render farm for Maya, basically, this is probably what you're thinking in your head. This should be pretty close to what you're imagining. I would correct me if I'm wrong, but this is probably it, right? Now you've got all this support software like Substance, ZBrush, Motion Builder, and all that stuff, and you might be bringing data from there into Maya, and then from Maya you're sending it to Unreal. Now the reason why I didn't make the render farm also include Unreal, even though we're using Unreal as a render farm in this scenario, is the reason because that reasoning is because I wanted to make sure that we see the bidirectional arrows. This is something you should catch yourself thinking about, because if you're using Unreal like basically like a render farm, then how come it's bidirectional? Why are you considering that Maya has to update with whatever you did in Unreal, and what you did in Unreal has to update with what you did in Maya? So this kind of concept already should make you take a step back and go, wait a second, I'm not thinking of it really like a render farm, because obviously I'm imagining that there's going to be some sort of bidirectionalness. Now, I've been in companies where that bidirectional kind of concept existed, and there was a lot of money spent for it. And honestly, it was a big waste of money, because this is a counterintuitive way of using Unreal. And I'm going to go over that in just a second. The most important thing here is that we understand that this is what I call the DCC pipeline. DCC is just a fancy term that Autodesk likes to use to describe any software like Maya, Maya, 3 Studio Max, XSI, Blender, whatever. And this kind of pipeline has been around for a very long time. One of the first games I ever worked on was with the Konami engine, and we were using Softimage as basically an editor. So this kind of pipeline was pretty close to what we had over there. We would use Softimage to build our levels and all of our assets and export things with naming conventions and such. And then there was all these scripts that would put it together into an actual build that we could test on some special machines that were set aside for building. And this, I've also seen it on Dead Space, like that was like 10 years later. We still had this kind of concept of the DCC in the middle, where the DCC is your engine editor. And it's that kind of mentality has slowly disappeared. Okay, and it's because of this, and not because of Red Lobsters, not because of salads, because of what it means. So I call this the Red Lobster effect. It's basically, you are going to Red Lobster, which is a specialized restaurant that does seafood really well. In fact, even their pizza with lobster is fantastic, apparently. And you went in there and you ordered a chicken salad. Now, it might not be a bad salad, but it's not what Red Lobster specializes in. So whenever you're using Unreal like that, you're using it like the Red Lobster effect. So you're not going to get the best out of that software. And already with that, that's going to create some tension when you're using it, because you're expecting the software to work a certain way, which it was clearly not designed for. So I would say that a lot of the DCC centralized thinking has gone away because of that. Because now we have engines, and there's been a significant amount of development in softwares. If you just look at how much development there was in Maya in the last 10 years, it's pretty bad. There's not much going on there. In fact, it almost feels like it's getting smaller every time. They keep getting rid of stuff or pushing things out like PyMel and such. Remember Mental Ray? Remember PyQt? Anyways, there's a whole bunch of stuff that just kind of disappears from Maya, whereas in the game, for game engines, it's been getting bigger and bigger, and it's including more and more things, and it's getting more. It's more specialized now. It has more features that can be used now, even for it can even do like the real-time green screens. So this gets me to the output pipeline, where you are focusing on where everything should live, so to speak. And you can replace the word Unreal in the case of Pixar and just put Presto right there. And then, you have RenderMan and all that stuff. And the same thing goes for other places like DreamWorks with their Primo, the software for animation called Primo, and then their Moonray for their rendering and all that stuff. So the idea is to focus really on the output, where it should live. And if you look at the pipeline, it's very similar, except you're now starting to treat Maya as just another support software. There's no reason why Maya should be the central software when you're doing this kind of stuff, because if you think about it, what's the difference between Substance and Maya at this point? I mean, your Substance is generating your textures. Maya is you're going in there to create your animation. Maybe you're doing some modeling in there. You're working with ZBrush to get some stuff into Unreal. I mean, at the end of the day, this is if you start to think more in this way, it's going to be a better time. and you're going to have a lot easier time. So, for example, already with this, just consider cameras. If you are building your shots inside of Maya and you're doing your layout in Maya, and then you're going into Unreal and you're recreating the environment or exporting FBXs with large scenes and trying to get that into Unreal and then get the cameras to work in Unreal, flip that around. Try considering doing everything in Unreal first, setting up your layout, your scene and everything, put in some cameras, and export the camera from Unreal to Maya for you to be able to animate. Try to consider that idea. It's going to be so much easier to work if you start thinking from that perspective. And later on, I'll show you, it's going to take no time at all to create a good, proper camera in Unreal, bring it into Maya, and have a scene in Maya that will allow us to create our cinematic. So the other thing that I want to talk about, and this is as a result of, I guess, the bias from the people. Like in the case of my students, you have to consider that, your teachers are human beings. They have their own biases. And if they're coming from the movie industry, well, they might have a movie bias. So if you, when you think about the industries that are out there, you might think of the industries that you want to go into like this from what you've been told. And if that's not the case, great. But if this is how you're seeing things, you need to start asking some questions, okay? If you think, and if the people who it's tough. These are people who are training you and teaching you stuff. It's hard to ask questions for this. Like, why do you think the movie industry is bigger than games? The first thing you got to think about is, what are they bigger at? What exactly is the bigger industry? Is it revenue? Is it the one that makes the most money? Because, you got all that Hollywood money in here, and games, they're just these dinky little things for kids to play type of thing. If that's what you're thinking, that's very 1990s. So the people who are telling you the movie industry is the bigger industry, I'd like to see where they're getting that information from. So this goes to my second point, which is really important, and it's this concept of major league and minor league. Quite often I don't want to get into a flame war about which is the bigger industry from this perspective, because as far as I'm concerned, there is no major league and minor league, because they're just two different sports completely. So I could give you examples of how people that came from the movie industry that worked on games were awful, and they weren't stupid people. It was just they were awful because they didn't know how games worked, and they just had some really bad habits that it didn't work. And I'm sure the other way it's true too. So if we start thinking about major league and minor league, we need to start thinking about, are they really? Is this a good comparison? And this isn't only related to just movies and games. Even within games, we see console and PC as the major league. We call it AAA. And then you have mobile games, which are the minor league, right? And if you're looking for work, if that's your mentality, you're going to have a tough time, because you're missing out on a lot of opportunities that could get you started in your career. So this concept of major league and minor league, you got to forget about it. It's not even the same sport. So, and this is where a lot of energy is wasted, because let's get to some facts. So if you think that movies is the major league, or mobile games is like the minor league type of stuff, I want to show you this little graph here. And this is got some numbers that are a little bit old now. But if you look at pre-COVID numbers, which is like the height of movies as far as revenue goes, you have a $39 billion revenue in the box office, right? 39 is pretty respectable. But what you don't realize is that video games in totality is 180 billion. And that's just revenue. That's not from advertising and stuff like that. That's just direct sales and what they're selling in the game. So that number balloons even more than that. It's crazy how much money video games represent. At the time of this data for 2021, you have a scenario where you're almost 50-50 between mobile games and console and PC. console and PC combined are about the same as mobile. That's a number that's been changing drastically over the years, and mobile is slowly becoming a smaller relative to the other two. It's actually hasn't. It's been growing. It's just the other two have been growing much faster as well. So my point here is, if we're talking about revenue, then the king is mobile. Mobile games is bigger than anything. So maybe not. Let's not think of it that way. And if we look at it some more modern numbers, we're starting to see that even now there's a new category that's emerging. And this is a low number because it doesn't consider the combination between mobile games and browser games. So browser PC games have just kind of sprouted out, and it might not seem like much, or like 1%, but it's still $2 billion. It just popped up, and that number is actually closer to 9 billion because it's how it depends on how you count it, based on phone games. So the big money is in games, and all the movie people knew this. Back in the early 2000s, video games outpaced in revenue the movies and the music industry combined. They actually surpassed it. And a lot of people took notice of this, because that means that the Hollywood kind of control that we had, and where the talent was, started to shift. And by about 2010-ish, we started having like movie legends start to come in and say some really unfortunate things about games. So I'm just going to show you this because it's important to understand the psychology of where some people are coming from. So in 2013, and I've got stuff from Roger Ebert and stuff like that too here, but I'm just going to go through this very, very quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Spielberg and Lucas say games can't be art, okay? Now, you got to understand that Spielberg tried to make video games around that time. I was actually at EA, and he was working on Boom Blocks. Okay, a lot of people don't even know what that is. Boom Blocks, according to Spielberg, was intended to be a moving story about a man who suffers from the untimely death of his wife and who has to reconcile himself with the idea of love. However, once the game controller was involved, Boom Blocks turned into a game about blowing up blocks that look like farm animals. This is why games can't be art. So his hot take is that games can't be art because of controllers, and not because he failed at actually making a game that sells, and because he's a guy that can't fail at anything, and he's just super awesome. He figured that video games can't be art. That's the line of thinking that we're dealing with here. So he lost all credibility with that one. But to add insult to injury to what he was saying, the last bit of this article says, when he was asked about games that obviously are art, like the Last of Us, the first part in particular, that one was incredible. He says, "No, I haven't tried those games, but if they use a controller, they simply cannot be artistic and daring as Indiana Jones 4. That's the one with the crystal skull and the aliens." Okay, so obviously, after I remember reading and hearing about this like 10 years ago, and as far as I was concerned, Spielberg had lost all credibility, and I was wondering if he just lost his mind. But I think it's just spitefulness. He failed at being able to make games, like making money in games, make his name in the video game industry, and he just doesn't get what games are. So I just feel there's a lot of spite here. The unfortunate reality of this is that you're going to find that because of this stance, a lot of people take the side of games aren't art. And it's just a very bizarre stance to take, especially when you just blame it on the controller. And this isn't different. Roger Ebert, which is he's a critic who basically poo-pooed on games because it's not something he understands, or he really doesn't get where it could go. And I'm just going to say this for 2024. The best movie I saw in 2024 was something called Perfect Days, which not a lot of people know what it is. To put it simply, it's about a guy who cleans toilets that finds happiness in a way. He does that for a living, and there's a lot more to it, obviously, but it's a really great film. And yes, this is art. For me, this is art. So if you look at Deadpool, as funny as it was, it's not really artistic. Yeah, but that's, as far as movies go, there's very few of these, and there's a lot of like the Marvel stuff. So yeah. So for as far as art goes, if we really want to talk about art, that was great. But then for games, we have something called metaphor. And even the art style is using stuff from the Renaissance, from someone named Hieronymus Bosch. Bosch had these had a crazy art style that was very interesting to analyze, and that's clearly in the game. Like all these weird monsters and weird. Anyways, the story. If I could just tell you, metaphor is basically it's almost like an analysis and a question that's being asked. If you could somehow decide what system of governance you would use in society, and then if you could explore all the different kinds of methods of governing, like you have like kings and queens, you could have democracy, you could have fascism, you could have all these things. Even nihilism is in here, and it explores that idea, and it shows you stuff that we haven't seen very often in any form of media. So games obviously can be art. And just to top it all off, this is this year. At the time of this recording, we have Spielberg coming back again with the controllers are the bane of games, and that's why it can't be art. But still, he says he loves playing Call of Duty, and let's be real. He doesn't actually like playing Call of Duty. It seems like it's his only way of connecting with his son. I think he's finally realized that he was from a generation that didn't take games very seriously, but the next generation is, and it's a whole. And if you want to connect, you gotta at least try them out. So it's interesting that he says that he loves Call of Duty, but that's just because he can play it with his son. Anyhow, all of this, just put it together. Hopefully, I put it together for you in a way that you can see where I'm going with this. So if you're approaching Unreal, to get back to Unreal, if you're approaching it with the mentality that it's like, if you have also been sold the idea that Maya is the industry standard, even though we have stuff like Presto at Pixar and Primo at DreamWorks, and we have all this other stuff that we're using that isn't necessarily Maya. If you start to think that way, then you're closing yourself off to maybe other tools that are out there that have had a lot of development. And this is, I'm talking to you as somebody who is a plugin developer for Maya, and I can tell you that Unreal has had a significant amount of development in the last few years. So anyhow, let's keep that in mind. Let's take Unreal seriously, and let's try. It takes years to learn it and master it, and I'm going to try to show you as much as I can in the next sections, so that you can at least get to some kind of practical application and use it without too much pain. That's the purpose of this video, is to alleviate pain, and it starts by changing our expectations of what the software does and how it's supposed to serve Maya. No, it's the other way around. You use Unreal to bring it all together, and we're going to find ways to make that as pleasant as possible. Okay. All right, so now we're going to do the walkthrough where we're going to start looking at Unreal with what we've just discussed, and we can say, if you just skip to this part, the TLDR of the first section is that, look, it's going to take time to learn Unreal. Don't think of it as a support tool for Maya. In fact, it's the other way around. Maya is there to create animation, and you bring it into Unreal. There's a lot to learn. Unreal has a lot of stuff going. In fact, most of the stuff that I've learned in the last couple of years have been mostly related to Unreal, so it's not something to be taken lightly. You have to go in with goodwill and try to learn as much as you can, because there's a lot of stuff in here. Okay, so the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try to see if I can get you to have some habits, pick up some habits that could help you out in the long run. So I've opened up the Epic Games, I guess, launcher, And in here, what we have is a couple of things that are very handy for us. So one of the best things you can do to learn how to use Unreal is to actually grab a few free things and take a look at how they're put together. And that's actually going to it's probably going to be a better idea than just going in thinking that I'm going to do what I always do in Maya and it's going to work in Unreal. This is going to help you much more. So if I go into the library section, one of the things I've mentioned a couple of times now in the other videos has been the idea of you should be going to the marketplace every time you can, every chance you get, and see what's free that month or that week, because the stuff just shows up all of a sudden, and it's good to grab it. And I've been doing it for a while now, as you can see. And a lot of these things are, frankly, there's a lot of them that are handy. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've created a new project for us. And in it, we're going to look at some of the things I already included in there from these things that I've picked up that are free, that are going to help us understand a little bit better how Unreal is put together and how you're supposed to do things with Unreal. One other thing that I'm going to mention is Marketplace has been removed from this. So we now have something called Fab, and unfortunately it's now going to another website, but it's actually not so bad. Like, I'm going to open it up now. So this is the website that it's connected to. Like, let's be real, the Unreal Marketplace and the whole thing, the way it was structured, wasn't the greatest software, like the greatest interface. Here things got a little bit more complicated, but look, at the end of the day, it's very simple. You come to Fab and log in with your Unreal account, and it will. The first thing that you should do is take a look either down here or up here where it says limited time free. So I'm going to click on the limited time free, and we'll give it a second. There we go. I'll do it that way. And these are the free things. So I haven't grabbed some of these. So that you can actually see the process. So I'm going to just click on, let's say, the Dragon Temple, which is actually quite nice. Like, if we look at the Dragon Temple, this is a very nice map. And this is there's a lot of stuff going on here, everything from particle effects to really good lighting in some places. The modeling is actually really interesting, how they've done their normal maps really well. And they even have a few images for, they'll have this map usually that comes with it that will allow us to see all the individual pieces that they built for building this map. So I'm going to go add to cart. And I'm going to accept this. I thought I already accepted that one, but it's free, so it's okay, right? Over here, Ancient Construction. This is also one that I haven't picked up, so I'm going to add that to the cart. And then over here, you just check out. This is nothing new that you haven't seen before. Make sure that you have a nice fat 0 and nothing. You're not actually paying $209. And you place an order, and then that will be added to your it will be added to your account. So now if I go over here and I go to my library and I go refresh, I should see that stuff. What was the name of it? We had Dragon Temple. So if I search for Dragon Temple, there it is, Dragon Temple. And now I can just click on here and just add it to whatever project I'm currently working on. It's that simple. So in that case, it was really easy. And the one thing that's also interesting about Fab is that it has free assets. Oops, I'll just go here. It has free assets as well that are quite handy, that are assets that you have to still bring into Unreal and set up correctly. But these are good for anything. That you could use them. You can use them in Maya. You could use them on other engines and so on. One of the things I like to do is go into the Unreal Engine section specifically and look around for things that you can even organize this by the cost. If I'm not mistaken, there was a way of doing that. I forgot where the button was for it. But anyways, if you put it in order of how much it costs and filter it out that way, you can look through things that are actually free. Like here, there's already a whole bunch of stuff here. This is from Quixel. So if I look here, this old mine, which actually looks really nice, depending what you're doing, this could be great. So then you can add to my library. And in this case, you can download it directly because it has FBX formats. Anyways, my point is, get into the habit of going to this Fab webpage for fabrication or and fabulous, I guess. I don't know what this is meant to be, but at the end of the day, it is great for building things for us. So this is a great place for resources. It covers characters, it does environments, effects, everything is here, and that's very handy. Even though it's not as handy as it used to be while being directly in the in this thing, it's actually still, I find it's pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the project that I set up, where I'd already the content folders here, and I preloaded it with a whole bunch of stuff from that library that I had. Now this project in particular, when it starts, it gives me this blank scene for us to run around in. One of the things that's interesting is just from this default map that's already here, we can already start to glean to see some things that could help us. So for example, you see this, the way it's built, it's made out of these individual pieces. It's not a model that's made for this specifically. It's not like made in Maya where you model it, export it, and that's it. No, what they do is they have all these pieces, like Lego pieces, and they put them together. And then you make shaders so that it combines things. So for example, if I do this kind of thing, it should, like the materials should line up nicely. So anyways, point is, one of the things you have to decide early on is, are you going to make a unique map, or are you going to make a Lego map? Are you going to use landscapes, or are you not going to use landscapes? These are all questions that I'm going to go through right now. And we're going to go through most of these approaches to building things. You're going to notice that none of them are basically using the USD file format where it auto-generates things exported from Maya. I would say it's very counter to Unreal's setup. One other thing that I'm going to mention is, while you're looking at assets that didn't go through an optimization phase or didn't pass through like a tech art department or so on, take a look at what is going on your computer. So for example, I'm gonna just flash two things to the screen. I've got this thing here that I'm constantly monitoring. I'm monitoring how much my CPU is working. I'm looking at my GPU as well to make sure it's not overheating, that kind of stuff. All of these things, and over here I have specifically temperatures for my look, right now with Unreal 5, it's pretty hard on your hardware. So I'm being careful to make sure that I'm not overdoing it with, like, if some assets are bad, then it's time to not use them or optimize them. You have to pick one or the other. It's never good to have assets that are so heavy that you're going to struggle working in there. And I know that optimization is not for everybody, but just being conscious of it and knowing if you have an optimal setup is important to understand what is optimal, what isn't optimal. And once you start opening up maps and you start seeing, like, all of a sudden your CPU just jumps up to like it goes crazy, then you know there's something wrong with the method that they used. Okay, so it's just, think of it as an indicator of how it was built and so on. So if you're in that stage where you're just opening up stuff, that kind of comes in handy. So I'm going to start by looking at landscapes and things that are outdoor. All right. So the first one I'm going to look at is going to be the one that says Lush. So I have Lush. Usually you have a folder called Maps, and you're going to have something like this, a demo map, and usually you have an overview map. I'll explain what those two are in just a second. But first, we're just going to load up a map. I already had loaded this beforehand. For navigation, it's not going to be like in Maya. You got to start thinking more like video games. Like, for example, you can use your mouse, and if you if you right click, you can get this thing where you can look around. If you left click drag, you're going to, like, drive along the floor. And if you press WASD while right clicking, you can move forward. And if you use the wheel, you can increase the speed at which you travel in. Okay, just with that alone, you should be able to fly around your map. Think of this as Minecraft creative. So instead of survival, this is basically everything is Minecraft creative when you're in a game engine. And it's nice that this game engine is actually pretty decent. This editor in particular is actually quite good. at telling you what's going on. It'll pop up with messages and let you know that there's something wrong. All right, so the first thing I wanted to show you was the concept of landscapes. Now, landscapes, if you zoom out far enough and go up, at the end of the day, a landscape is kind of like what we used to call a noise field, or just a texture that has noise. Basically, the more white it is, the higher it is, the darker the pixel, the lower it pushes the ground. So basically, imagine this this square area is could be made up of one big old area with a texture on it that determines how high up it goes, and then there's algorithms that determine how things get blended. So, for example, if I go down here, let's say these flowers over here on that little hill, if I go into landscape mode like this, now I'm going to switch to my Wacom again. I keep going back and forth between Wacom and such because sometimes it's not easy to use the Wacom, and sometimes I don't want to use the mouse too much because of carpal tunnel. But anyways, for the most part, you can also control the camera like this if you don't want to use the right click and the wheel on the mouse to control the speeds, and that can work with your Wacom tablet as well if you have the buttons on the Wacom for what the wheel does. And all I'm going to do is I'm in landscape mode, and I'm going to go with sculpt. Right now I've got the tool strength pretty low, 0.1, and if I draw like this, it makes a little hill. If I press shift, it seems to push it downward. So one is up and the other one is down. So if I want to, I can make another hill over here. And now we have a little place to get caught in collision. If you know what I mean. If you played games like that. Oh, we're in a tree. So if you just paint like this, all it's doing is it's painting a value on, like we said, like remember the big square that we were looking at? So all we're doing is we're painting that value either black or white, depending on what button we're pressing, if it's shift or not. And it's just going up or down. And then depending on the height difference, it will create these texture blends in between. So if I were to push downward, that texture might disappear or become grass, depending on what's around it and so on. So right now there, I'm starting to make something kind of messy, but I can smooth it out like so. And now we have less of a difference. So now it's creating this kind of thing. You'll notice that the trees and everything else is painted on top, and it's just positional data, and it'll stick to whatever the height is. If I wanted more flowers or trees, I could go into the foliage system, and let's say I want these little flowers, and I want to be able to paint them. So yeah, paint. So I can put more flowers here, maybe over here. So now we have some of these flowers, which are going to basically just, you can control how dense everything is, like the paint density and so on, how those flowers are going to be. And if I go back to landscape with the sculpting tool, I can make a little hill now. It's going to push it up, and then the grass that's also been painted on will grow around it. So the landscape tool is kind of like that concept I just mentioned. So it's just a big height map, basically. And depending on the height map, a lot of things get automatically adjusted. So it like for example, like the sides of this little mountain was changing depending on how much of a difference there was between one thing and another. And that's one way of creating these environments. Now, the thing is, you could say that this method is what we call a unique mesh, because this has been painted uniquely. You're probably not, but you could reuse it in another map in another place. But this is still unique to this place in the sense that this asset was created here for this specific map, and that's the use of it. So if you've ever heard of the game Destiny, for example, a couple of years ago they had a lot of drama over the vault, where they put a whole bunch of stuff from the game and they put it into the vault, which sounds almost Disney-like. But the point of it is they did it because they got rid of maps, missions, a whole bunch of stuff, weapons, a whole bunch, like a big part of the game had been put away. And they were saying that the game was getting too big in size. And the reason why that happened was the way people from Destiny work when they build their environments it's everything is unique. So they'll go into Maya, for example, they'll model some very cool rocks, and then that's it. You're only going to find that rock once in the whole map. And then they'll create more assets, and they'll make their map with a lot of unique stuff. Now I'm going to show you another map where we're going to start going more into the direction of reusable assets, and it's going to be more of an instance concept. So over here, even though the ground was unique, the trees are definitely not. So these trees, let's see if I go to, I'm just going to go to selection. The trees for this, well, it's using the foliage system. So all the trees are here. So if I wanted to paint more trees, I could go like this kind of thing and go to paint. I'm already there. And then you could just do this kind of thing, and it just draws trees. It's a little low, so chances are I'm probably not clicking on the right spot for it. But or these are bushes. Sorry. So that's what I'm doing wrong. These are actually bushes, so there's nothing wrong with what I was doing. So let's just put some palm trees over here. So something like this. Now these trees are not unique by any means. They're instances. It's just that they're slight variations for each one. So maybe it's the same mesh, same vertices, same everything, same shader, but then the rotation's different, the scale is different. Maybe the shader does something that actually changes the shape of it based on its location and its coordinate. There's a lot of little tricks where you make the shader make adjustments to it. Maybe one's a little bit more green, the other one's a little bit more yellow. These are all things you can do that can be automated so that they're a little bit different, and then it creates the sense of variety. But the concept behind it is very important. Each one of these is a tree that already you can see. I only picked from 4, and yet I was able to make that look pretty different. Like it doesn't really look like it's a copy paste. I just clicked. So basically these assets, you're going to see that when I click on them, it's going to show me that it's in the library. So if I double click that, it's off screen. I'll bring it over. This is a tree that was built, and it's at 0, 0. Like, so if you were in Maya, this would be 0, 0 of Maya. The tree was built and exported just to be able to be added as one of the many trees that will get painted on the ground. And so you have to take care in building this, and you have to set it up so that you have normal maps and the UVs for those normal maps. You have to have UVs for light maps, and you have your normal maps and all that stuff, and it's all as clean as possible. So one of the things I do is from Substance, I'll export Unreal friendly images where the roughness and the metallic, for example, are the red and the blue channel in an image, so that in the shader I can say grab the red one for the red channel of that texture, and that's going to be my metallic, or whatever order you put it in. So Substance is going to help us pack the information of the material into these images, and then in Unreal we're going to unpack them based on channels and such. So something like that is very efficient. It's cost effective. You're only loading one texture, and you're just going to different channels to get that information. And if we were to open up the materials for each one of these, I'm sure we could find that it's exactly what I just mentioned. That's those kind of tricks to set it up. And then there's this one's a special one where you have vertices that move based on some sort of a wind pattern that you can put into the shader, and that could be based on world space. Anyways, the point is, you're not importing anything. You're not just clicking export from Maya and you're bringing in the assets. No, you're making the individual pieces. And in the case of landscapes, you're making unique landscapes using Unreal. You didn't use Maya to generate the landscapes. So that's something that you might want to consider. Now, like I said, I'm going to open up another file where we're going to get even further than this in the concept of instancing, where we have the same mesh but with little variations. I'm going to show you something. Let's see here. Let's go to Content Browser. Let me get rid of this. So Content Browser, we're going to a map called, well, we could look at the Deep Elder Caves. Okay, so let's go with that one. So we're going to go to, and this one's kind of rough on the system, so don't save. Okay, you can tell that my RPM on my GPU is going crazy. So that's normal when you're unloading heavy things and loading like large maps. This is definitely one of the heavier maps. We'll give it a second before it really gets loaded. Yeah. There's kind of a few things that you can do where you can press G to get rid of any objects, and it'll give you more of a graphic, like it'll give you more of what the final result would be if you were playing a game. So just by pressing G, you can make all these helper type or symbols. Like for example, over here, I'm pretty sure those are like if I grab this and I move it, you're going to see it's a texture that's projecting onto the mesh. This is kind of an expensive method that I don't like using too much. I'd rather do it directly in the shader and blend it within the shader, because you can use this for all kinds of stuff. Like you'll notice that kind of weird shadow gives a little bit of variety as you move it. So and it can affect just the specular or just the metallic. It could do a lot of stuff. But I generally don't use decals that much because of the usual cost that goes with it. Now, one of the things that is useful is I just press tilde and it opens up the console command, and you can do something called stat GPU, for example. So I'm going to go stat GPU. That'll give you more information about what's going on if you're interested. You don't need to do it. Like you can see what's going on with your GPU, how many milliseconds are going to certain things. So even though we're in the editor and there might be other costs that are coming through, when we optimize for the final game, these are important things to know and to see where your GPU is doing all the work. So right now the shadows, just calculating the depth, the shadow depths, that's the thing that's causing it the most. It's actually 13 milliseconds. That's quite a bit of so here's a way of understanding this. Let's say that you want to go and aim for something that looks nice but doesn't necessarily run at a fast frame rate. So let's say you say, I want to make it like a film, where I want to have a film that runs at 30 FPS. Okay. And depending what region too, because there's 24 FPS as well, which is acceptable for film. But 30 FPS, let's say, you want to make something that runs at 30 FPS, and you just have to do the math. It's 30 frames per second. So how many seconds is there for one frame? So it's going to be a decimal, right? Because we're saying that there are 30 of these per second. So it's 1/30th of a second is all you have time to draw a single frame, by the nature of the concept of 30 frames per second, right? I mean, it's not complicated. Now, the actual number for that is 33 milliseconds. That's how we usually measure that. So if we have 33 milliseconds, and it takes that much time to draw a single frame on your screen, you will reach 30 frames per second, no problem. So that's the way you have to look at this. So if you want something to be running at 60 frames per second, well, you're going to have half the time to draw the same frame, right? So you better make sure that you can do it in no more than 15 milliseconds in total. So that's what how we calculate that kind of thing. So maybe for us right now, we're not interested in that. So I'm going to just tap up. I pressed the tilde again, and then pressed up, and then it'll show you some of the last ones that I did. And I'm going to try stat unit. This is an important one. I'll get rid of the stat GPU. I'll just close this. Now, what stat unit does is it's going to show you basically consider them threads. They're kind of like you have the thing that is for the frame itself, like calculating how much time it took to draw this, the worst case, because there's multiple things going on at the same time. For those of you interested in games and stuff like that, the game thread is the one that does all the math for, it's usually CPU that does the hard work here for calculating, okay, I'm standing here, have I activated this event? Am I triggering an enemy because I'm in their line of sight? That kind of stuff. So that's usually on the game thread. And if you have a bottleneck there, it doesn't matter how good you're rendering, your frame rate will drop because the game thread is being overloaded. So then you have the draw, which is normally where we spend most of our work because it's usually the bottleneck. So for something in rendering is usually the thing that's causing the bottleneck. And so if you don't want to see things in milliseconds, you can use the tilde button again and you type stat FPS and it's just going to add it to the top. You should be able to see it up here. It's in green, but here we go. I'll put it so that it has a black background. You can see that it's running. This map is running at 36 frames per second on average. At least it's over 30. And you have to remember you're still in the editor and you'll have a different setup. Everybody has a different setup. My computer right now has a problem where it kind of runs out of VRAM rather quickly. Unfortunate for video cards these days to have only 8 gigs of VRAM. And I feel really bad for any person using a Mac that has unified memory and then has Apple put glue on it so you can't even upgrade it or change it or touch it. Anyhow, point is, for when you're going to be doing this stuff, hopefully you'll have a video card that's about 8 gig. If you're going to be looking at the very least 8 gig to be able to look at these maps comfortably and to analyze them. So now we're going to start looking at some of these pieces that have been put here. What you're going to find is that there's like this piece here has been put on the ground. So again, it's not like you were in Maya and you just created a big surface and then you exported it. No, these are actually little bits and pieces that are like Lego pieces that you can place on the ground and that you've created a floor. And there's quite enough of these. Like if you look over here, it's a static mesh. It's not part of the landscape or anything. And if I double click that, it'll open up what that asset is. And it's going to show me that this is the asset that was used for this. And so if you want to make a floor, you could just grab multiple versions of this and just kind of do a mosaic on the ground and change their scales and their colors and so on. And in the case of how this map was done, they threw over a whole bunch of decals to basically paint over it with textures. So that's how they're building this asset. Now, it's not like the landscape we saw. This is already now modular pieces that kind of come together, like this one here. This one's a different one. It might be a different one. It might be the same one. Actually, it's the same one. So that's funny. Like a lot of pieces down here are just the same piece being used over and over again, but with some sort of something that makes it look different or allows you to blend it with other things. And this is a lovely map. Honestly, there's a lot going on in this map, and I downloaded it for free. It was part of a pack. That's why I suggest strongly looking at the free stuff every month, because there's some really good things. If they're doing something you like visually, take it apart, understand how it works. Like, are these pieces, like these skeletons, are they part of the mesh? Well, let's find out. If I double click this and go up here, oh, look at that. It's the same piece again. So then it's like, these are something else. These are other little modular pieces that they just scattered on top of it. So it's this kind of construction that you're going to find that maps have. You're going to start seeing that these are the general methods that are being used. So instead of loading, like by making it modular like this with pieces that are being reused constantly, you don't end up with the problem that the people from Bungie had, where they had to gut half the game out because it was just getting to be over 200 gig download. So they had a problem. They couldn't add any more content without just filling the PlayStation up. So this is how you do that. You make things modular, and you don't have to make unique pieces all the time, which means if you're making your final film, just keep that in mind, that a lot of Unreal is making things into modular little pieces and not so much unique pieces. Okay, and for the last section, we're going to bring everything together. So all the stuff that we've been talking about, because now we're starting to get good habits. We're starting to look at assets. Like this is an environment that I'll go over what I did in order to make it usable. But this environment here, we have something that we'll be able to set up like a layout and have some characters set in the right spot. And very importantly, we're going to be setting a reference point for us to use that will then be our 000 inside of Maya. And then we're going to be able to do all of our shots from that point, and then export our animations so that we can load them in to our characters. So by now, hopefully, we've started to pick up some good habits, and we're starting to see assets differently. So when we're looking at this environment from the marketplace or the fab, yeah, I got this in the marketplace while it was still called that. Each one of these assets now, we should start seeing them as Maya scenes. So if I look at this thing and I double click here, this is a Maya scene as far as I'm concerned. The 00 is here for Maya, and that this asset was created, let's say, in Maya, and then it was exported from Maya as an FBX. Nothing complicated. I did all my UVing, and over here then I created a material inside of Unreal, which has a full-fledged shader, a very good solid shader tool to be able to author all these materials, and I'm able to create the materials that I need. And I can even combine material properties with animation and so on, things that are very difficult to do inside of Maya. And the other benefit, of course, everything is real time, even though my hardware is taking a beating. So let's talk about, first of all, let's just think about Presto for Pixar for just a second. Now, the reason why Presto even exists is because animators were not getting real-time feedback for I believe it was Monsters, Inc. So because they had fur and stuff like that, this was stuff that they couldn't do in real time in Maya. And also Maya in general wasn't even GPU or even CPU multi-threaded. So it was a very bad performance inside of, and that's like 10 years ago. We've had issues with that for a while. Whenever I would speak to someone from the animation industry that came from movies, specifically, they would tell me, yeah, we're used to just making play blasts. We don't see anything in real time unless the tech artists have created a proxy rig, which is a simplified version of the rig for us to be able to animate with. And I thought that was a pretty sad world to live in, and I could understand why Presto was then developed and why every other major studio started doing that kind of stuff. In the video game industry, there was a big shift over to other softwares other than Maya for real-time rigging and animating. So you can imagine the importance of having a real-time feedback. So that being said, while you're working in Unreal, you need to just pay attention to a few things. Like maybe you don't need to go into too much depth, like just having an open hardware monitor with a couple things being observed will help you out. So like I said, if you open up a scene and your computer is just dying, there are things we can do to make it so that you get a better real-time feedback. So for example here, one of the most important things that is something that you should always be paying attention to. So if you're going to be working and making your layout, you should be paying attention to this here, GPU memory used. So at the time of this recording, my computer, it's a long story. I had a flood, it destroyed my home and everything I owned. And eventually I was able to, it was difficult to get a computer, and all I could get was an 8 gig video card. And that's been kind of my reality for a long time, where I'm always watching how much VRAM is being used. Now, main memory is not as important when you're inside of Unreal, even though it is important. That's more of how many Chrome tabs can I have. But when it comes to actual assets, all of the textures are usually the biggest concern. So if you have a scene like this one where there's a lot of assets here to make this environment, and then there's going to be more when you start generating light maps and stuff like that, that goes into the VRAM. So it's not going to go into the main memory. But that means that if you ever get too close to it, you're going to have some issues, and you're going to have warnings pop up, and you're even going to maybe throttle, and your frame rate's going to drop really bad. So what I do is I always make sure that my layout isn't like already I'm getting there. So this is, and I did a lot of work to get it there. So if you're having trouble with this, you need to get this under control right away for your layout. Either make the environment much simpler, or do some of the tricks that I do. So for example, if I go to, let me just grab this, I'll show you. I'll go straight to the material here. And then I'm going to go to the texture, like let's say this albedo. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'll let you know if I'm running out of memory. You should see the warnings anyways pop up. So if you look at this texture, for example, I'm going to go like this. I'm going to close this now because it found it. It found it in this folder. This folder, because it was well put together, this map has all of the textures under here, under the textures folder. if I go and filter this and I go show me textures that are just straight up textures, now it's going to show me all the textures that are here. So what you would do, you can do this one by one, or you could do them all together at the same time using the, like if I do this, I'm probably going to start running out of memory by doing this, but it's okay. So what we're going to do is, first I'll do one. So I'm just going to load this one. This texture, I mean, it was originally 4K. 4K is pretty big. If you consider how many textures there are, it's going to eat up your VRAM. Right? We're just doing this because we're just cleaning up the scene so that we can work in real time and be comfortable while we're setting up our characters and animating. This is important. So if you find that all your textures are in 4K, you're going to run out of memory right away. You're going to have a bad time in Unreal and any software, really. Even in Maya, if you start loading up too much stuff and it starts swapping, and your Maya, this is why your Maya crashes, possibly, for all you know. So if you keep it clean, like I generally, like the funny thing is, everybody always tells me Maya crashes. And I'm like, no, it's actually pretty stable. You just have to be careful with what you're loading. Avoid too many references and stuff like that. And there's not much that Maya crashes on me. So I actually have a good experience as far as that goes with Maya. For textures, what you do is you look at how it was imported. So this is important because if you're going to go into games, you'll know that you can import it at 4K, but you can choose how it goes to that platform. So if you want to make a Switch version of your map, this map's going to be kind of rough, but maybe you can lower the textures across the board so that they're like just an eighth of what you have inside of the editor on PC or what you have on PlayStation 5, for example. So I've already forced it to say, go to 1K. So don't ever go beyond 1K because there's a lot of textures that it has to load. And you can do this very easily. Unreal is really nice for this. Every time you have like a whole bunch of stuff and details, you have a search bar and you can search for the word max and you say maximum texture size and you just set it to 1024. And that's great. So now it's forced. Another thing that you could do, and you could do this in case you're in a bind, the LOD bias. So the way it works is in most video games that are open world, you're going to have an LOD that is a level of detail. Meaning if your mesh is, let's say, 1,000,000 polygons, it's like a super high quality mesh. I don't know, maybe you're using nanite. So let's say you have 1,000,000 polygons on this thing, and it only takes up maybe a small portion of your screen. It decides to take it down to 500,000, and it has another one loaded in memory where it renders faster because it's only 500,000, and then 250,000, and so on. And you have all these different variations of the same mesh loaded in memory, unfortunately, but at least when it comes to rendering, you're not overloading things. So the level of detail can help us out here because you can say, I'm going to force the level of detail on the texture itself. These are called MIPS, but it's not important. Right now, the most important thing is that you have a number. If you set it to 0, it means it's going to be whatever number you had up here. If I set that to 1, it cuts it in half. Actually, it's a quarter, but it cuts the resolution in half. So if it was 1024, now it's 512. But it's 512 by 512. So you've effectively cut for every 4 pixels, now you have 1 pixel. And this helps a lot, and you can even see Unreal is great about this. It's telling you what the resource size is in memory, and but it's not necessarily what's on the video card. So keep that in mind. And you can force all of your textures to have an LOD bias, and it'll just cut the texture size. I prefer, because this number can be like a lot of artists and tech artists will go in there and do this LOD bias across multiple objects. It's not good to force this one because you might be undoing someone else's work. So generally what I do is I leave it at originally and just set a maximum. So don't go over 1024 for a texture, and just cut it off at that. And for the most part, this is more than enough. Okay, so now how to do all these textures all at the same time? Well, you select them all like this. You right click and you go asset actions. There is the edit selection and property matrix. Oh, by the way, if you ever want to export your asset, this is another thing that you can do. like you want to make TGAs, PNGs, and stuff like that out of these assets and get them out of Unreal, you can export. You can do a bulk export of everything you've selected. Also, migration is a term that we use in order to say I want to send these assets to another Unreal project that I'm working on. This is a good way of sending stuff from one place to another. Anyways, the most important thing right now is edit selection and property matrix. It's going to warn you, hey, I'm going to load that. See how important it is to Unreal to tell you what is loaded and not loaded, because this has such a huge impact on your workflow. So I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead, load it all. And it's even this menu, it's like as I scroll, it's going to be updating because it's a lot of stuff to load all at once. So what you would do is you would select everything like this. And unless it's something that you have in a column, you just go over here just like you did with the other one. You go to max, and then you say maximum texture size is going to be 1024, right? And you're good to go, and you save them, and that's that. Piece of cake. So just by doing that alone, you're going to notice that you're doing okay, VRAM-wise and memory-wise, most likely. And if you're still having trouble, just crunch that texture as much as you can, because all you really need is to be able to do your shots, and maybe the textures like this. This for 1024 is still pretty crisp, so it's not bad. Like these textures are really not bad for what we just did. There's obviously if you get close to this, you're going to start seeing this is a lot blurrier than it used to be. But for the most part, we got what we wanted. That's not important. Okay, so now we've got our layout, and I've gone ahead and all I did was add a couple of these little trucks here, these food carts. They have a couple of bottles I added. Remember that in Unreal, sometimes the best thing is to break things down to little pieces instead of having big things imported. So this is only being loaded in memory once because we have two of them. Maybe we have different materials applied to it, and it's the same food cart. So it doesn't matter. You just change the material, and that's okay. You were intelligently using these assets, and we're making sure that any changes we make to one asset is affecting the other ones. We're not duplicating our work. The other important thing is that each one of these assets, like I mentioned again, I can't stress this enough. If you look at this asset, and I double click here for the static mesh with all of its materials, this is a Maya scene. It's 00 is where I would export this asset from. And then that becomes the actor's 0, like where it was 00 in Maya, that's the actor's position. And then it's the actor's position here, where you have all these numbers, that's the position in the world. So it came from Maya 00, and then I can place it anywhere I want. So it doesn't matter if I have, let's see, if I do this, that's Maya 00 still. It makes sense, right? Now, the thing that you want to remember also, and this is an important thing that I need to make sure it's clear. We just talked about the actor's position. So its location here is a big number. It's like in the thousands, okay? The last thing you want to do, and this is from years of experience, okay? The last thing you want to do is export these assets and bring them into Maya and then animate it relative to these coordinates. The second you do that, you're going to have something called a floating point error, or it's precision basically that you're losing by having things in Maya far away in these crazy coordinates, because Maya, for the most part, it seems like it really wants you to work in from 0 to 10. Remember, I don't know if you've seen the other videos, but if you've seen some of my other videos, you notice that for whatever reason, Maya's default is always in decimeters. Everything, like characters are 2 units tall. And then you have, it's kind of weird because that's like 200 centimeters. So it's 2 meters. I guess it's working in meters and sometimes, or it's 20 units tall. And then it's decimeters. And then you're like, okay, that's weird. But as far as most engines go, you'll find that everything's been optimized for centimeters. And that optimization has to do with the decimal and precision. So if you bring something that has a big number into Maya and you animate way far away from the origin, you're going to have a bad time. You're going to have maybe some trouble with compression of animation, and you're going to have things that start to shake. And you're going to be like, why is this shaking? Why am I having problems? And the problem is precision, the floating point precision. So what you need to do is make everything so that your cinematic animation in Maya will be some point that you decide. So the first thing that I do is once I've set up some things in Unreal, I go ahead and I add, these days it's called, I'm going to press G so we can see all the icons. So you can see all the stuff that I have here. And this is called an actor in Unreal 5. We used to call this a scene node. And a scene node was kind of like, think of it like a locator, just an object that is going to show up in your outliner. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do now that I've created this actor, I'm going to call this, first of all, I'm just going to keep clicking there. It's cine underscore root. This is going to be my cinematic root. And it disappeared here. Okay. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create, for this guy, I'm going to go create folder. And the folder is going to be called Cine in caps. And I'm going to right click this and I'm going to say make current folder. So anything that I create from this point on will automatically be added to this folder, which is part of my persistent level because I've set, anyways, levels, don't worry about it too much. Just know that you can have multiple, basically think of them like maps loaded at once. The purpose of this stuff is to, first of all, for streaming, so you can load things as you progressively get close to things, but also being able to work with teams. So while one person is working on one part of a map, another person can be working on another one, and they're separate files, and you can load both of them at the same time and keep working. And if someone updates the one of those files, you can get the latest version of it. Anyways, the most important thing to understand here is Unreal is designed for teamwork and for multiple people working on things. And right now I'm just going to create a folder in the whatever, like persistent just means the whatever the map is called, it's that map. Because this map could be saved and loaded in another map, and that map's persistent will be whatever that map is called. So anyways, point is here, I'm in a walkthrough layout, and I've created a folder called Cine Current, and it's going to be under this map's like section. So if that's current now, if I reselect this object here, I can right click it and I go move to, and you should have something in here that allows you to find the Cine Current. It'll be nice and green for you to find real quick. And now you should have something that allows you to, let's see if I go like that, it'll go and find it. Dealing with the outliner in Unreal takes a little time. I'm sure there's better methods than what I'm using here, but at least now you have a folder that's current and you have a Cine root. Now, the next thing that I would probably do is create maybe a subfolder inside the Cine root where we have all of the environmental things, and that way we can separate our characters from our environment. So maybe what you could do is also create another root for the Cine root where it's just for environmental things. And then that's going to be imported into Maya nicely, because Cine root will show up as a transform. All right, so this is going to help us out. And this is going to be our 0 in Maya. And I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. So what I need to do now is let's deal with some characters. Let's just drop them in here. So we're gonna start creating our layout. I don't need this filter anymore, so I'm just gonna reset the filters. We're back. I created a little group here, a collection, so that I can quickly just drag and drop things into this this walkthrough. Normally, you just go into the folders and you find the things and you drag and drop them. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So for this, we haven't talked about what this cinematic is going to be. I figured the scenario is very simple. There's someone that looks like Death, or the Grim Reaper, that's going to be selling some pretzels to somebody, and their friend right next to them is going to be laughing at this scenario. That's it. It's really straightforward. And the other person's not too sure about buying something from the Grim Reaper. And we're going to use characters from Paragon, which is also assets that I downloaded for free. Paragon was a great game especially for how they built it. Like the technical aspect of it was fantastic. There's a lot to learn from those assets, and if hopefully you can go get them still from the Fab folder. If not, just let me know. And then here we go. So I'm going to bring in, I think this guy's name was Saravag or something like that. Give it a second. Okay. It's sometimes who knows what's going on. But okay, so we have a character. We brought him in. I'm going to lock the scale so that I can do all three of them at the same time. Maybe 0.75. Yeah, okay. That should do it. I'm going to just bring him in. And he already came with an animation because I pulled an animation out, which includes the mesh. And the reason why I did this is because there's a moment where he does this thing where he has his arm out, and I figured that's a good way of selling a pretzel. So I'm just doing my layout here. Normally your layout would not include animation already. I'm just trying to show you as much as I can kind of the things that you can do in Unreal. There's a lot you can do. You also notice my frame rate's solid. This is enjoyable to work with, this kind of stuff. And then we can do our animation. Nowadays you can even animate within Unreal, but if you're using Maya and you're used to using that, that's fine. And also I'm going to create a duplicate of this pretzel, and I'm going to bring that pretzel up here. Hopefully that's going in the outliner correctly. Yep. So if I take this pretzel and I okay, I'm going to set it. It doesn't like that. I need to set it to movable, because when it calculates lighting, it needs to know if this is something that can have light maps or has to move, it's dynamic, that kind of thing. So if now that it's set to movable, it means I can attach this to my character here, and it's asking me which bone I want to attach it to. So I'm going to go put it on the hand. This time it's left. So now it's attached to, this object has been attached to this object's hand left, which means if I select it and change the animation, the pretzel will follow hand left as if it was parented to it. That's great. Okay, so with that in mind, we have our character here, and we've added a pretzel in his hand, and he's ready to sell it to somebody. I'm doing things quickly, so it's no big deal. I'm going to go back to my content browser. We're going to take the person that it's being sold to. So I'm going to bring her in and find the frame where she's crossing her arms like, I'm not so sure about it. I'm not using the assets the way they were meant to be used. It's just for an example. And we're going to bring this into Maya, and we're going to deal with the issues. So she's just standing there. She's like, what is this? I don't know if I want to buy something from you. And we're going to have her friend, who wasn't a friend of hers in the game. She was a vampire. She was kind of like Blood Rain. And I found one where she's kind of laughing type of thing. And we can keep going. There we go. She finds it amusing. And now we have our shots, and then we would start making our setting up our cameras. So that should be in the outliner as well. Everything is there. Now what we do need is, maybe we need this food cart, for example, and this food cart. I'm just pressing Control here. Whoop. And then maybe a few, man, I keep Wacom issues sometimes, huh? Okay, so I keep doing this, and I'm just gonna grab a few things, doesn't matter. I just need some reference points, and then this one too. This one too. And I'm gonna grab the floor as well. We need the floor, so we know what we're doing. And this, and maybe this here. Okay, nothing much. We don't need much more than that for our shots, and we're just gonna right click here. And we're gonna say move. Where's the move? Hang on. There we go. Can't seem to find the move. Hang on. I'm gonna use a mouse just for a second. There should be a move button. Move to. Sorry, my bad. Okay, so here we go. Cine Current. Now it's in the Cine Current. So if I select it, we have this folder called Cine Current, and we have all of these things. Food cart 2. So we have food cart, which is the parent node, and then I parented all of the cans to that. And then what we could do is, we can even leave it as is, and I'll show you in Maya later how to put everything so that it becomes child of this node. This is just a reference node here in Unreal. We don't actually need to make it the parent node. We can do that in Unreal, no problem. So we can do that in Maya, no problem, later when we need to bring it into Maya. All right, so now that we have our layout done, we just need one more thing, which is we're going to need to set up a camera, and I'm going to do something very weird where I'm going to move some objects so that it shows us the framing of our shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to, no, actually, just for the sake of what I'm trying to do here, I'm going to try to get this bottle, okay, to be in the corner here so that it's touching the corners. And I'm going to have another bottle try to get it over there, like maybe one of these things, this bottle of ketchup. I'm going to try to get it up to here so it just touches the outside. And then remember, we're in a cinematic viewport. Make sure you're in a cinematic viewport when you're doing this. So that way it controls the, see if I do this, we're gonna have to do some work to make sure we're doing it correctly. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to create a camera here that's cinematic, and we can see it here, and we can over here we can go. Let's see here, perspective. Okay, so I can go right click on this and I can go. We want to pilot it. Pilot cinematic actor 28. There we go. So this is the actual camera. Now this camera is a camera that has all the features you'd want, and like it has all the proper lenses and stuff like that. So maybe we can take a 35 millimeter or a 30 millimeter camera, and it's going to be okay. So we're just going to set something up so that we can it's going to be a horrible camera, but it's going to be a camera that we can just test to see if things are working. So I'm bringing it in here like so, and I'm bringing this up like so. I just want it to be in frame, and same thing with this one. A second. There we go. All right, so I just want to do this. Now, if this comes out correctly, and I am going to exit the editing of this. So if I reselect it, you can see that it's got this is the actual camera. It's what I was doing before, so it should be fine. Everything should be in frame. So that green bottle and that a ketchup bottle should be the two corners of my shot. Now, to know that we did everything right, this will export. We'll see this exact camera inside of Maya exactly the same way. So let's try to see if we can do that. So we have everything here already, and that means we can just go shift click like so, and it should allow us to just go File, Export Selected, and I'm gonna dump that into let's see. Okay, test. So this is walkthrough layout test 2. And the only options, I'm going to just double check here. We've got, doesn't matter which year it is, try to be around 2019, something like that, something up to date. FBX hasn't really been changing all that much ever since 2012 with how normal maps were dealt with and tangent space and all that. And then we have not ASCII. It doesn't matter if we bring in the vertex color, it's not going to do anything. No level of detail. We're going to export the source mesh, so it should be bringing in things like the skeletal mesh and such. The preview mesh is what we want. That's the one for the skeletal mesh. Source mesh is like the stand and stuff like that, or the food cart. We can bring in the morph targets. It doesn't matter. And export local time, sure, why not? And then we have baking actor transforms. Yes, we want all that. So I'm going to export that. One of the nice things about Unreal is it's pretty fast with just about everything. So now it's just saving, making a backup in case things explode. So now if I go in here and I go import, don't mind me. Let's see. If I go here, I have walkthrough layout. So what do I have in my options? For remember, you have to look at the bottom here where it says files of type FBX, and then this will change. So we have, I can go back to my Wacom. So let's take a look here. We want smoothing groups for geometry. We want animation. This stuff is more for like motion builder type stuff. Update pivots from nulls. We don't want to unlock normals and all that stuff. Do not combine per vertex normals. Never. Okay, so with these options, I think don't modify. Like it will automatically understand that Unreal is Z up and that Maya is Y up. So if you don't mess around with those options, because all it's going to do, and this is a very old trick, okay? You're going to see any object that comes from a Z up or Y up, and it comes in to a place where it's the opposite, it always does a minus 90 degree rotation on the x-axis. That's all it is. It's just going to make sure that the root nodes have this minus 90 degree rotation. That's all there is. Okay, so we're going to import it. One thing to note, that reference node that I created, it's important to not touch its rotation. Make sure that it is unrotated, because and in Maya we're not going to rotate things either. So right now it is in that bad place where hang on a second. Let me get my brain to re-understand where we are. Okay, we're in this software. So we have Cineroot. And Cineroot, unfortunately, is going to be a transform, and there's not much we can do with that. So, and it's going to be hard to select. So I'm just going to add a bacon shape to it, and I'm going to just make it bigger so we can select this root much easier. So here we go. There we go. That's our 0, 0. Now we want all of this to be, this has to be 0, 0 in Maya, because when we're going to export stuff, the animation is going to be relative to this point. So if this is Maya 0, 0, the animation of this character will be moving from that point. So later on, we're going to match the two together very easily. And I probably don't even need to export animation in Maya, because right now these are not rigs, right? These are just temporary assets that, let's see here, like that. Seems like the pretzel that was here didn't get exported or isn't attached to that. But we do have a camera as well, I believe. Our Cine actor is over here. We could already test to see if this is working correctly. We can go over here and go panels, perspective, and see if this actor thing is good, and also make sure that look at that. I get the feeling we may have forgotten to export the other bottle, but we can see clearly the ketchup bottle is touching. It's almost like an arrow touching that point. And in Unreal, just to double check, let's see what, so it's this object, which was not included in the export. So yeah, so it's not bad considering. So if I go back to, let's see, this guy, and then I select the camera, considering the other bottles that were in the just behind it, that should be identical. And like we changed the camera and its lens and everything, and it's just fine in Maya, if I could just find it again. So this is the bottle that was behind it. I think I've proven my point here nonetheless, that you got a camera that's pretty much it's exactly the same. So if you would want, you could set up, like I mentioned before, we're setting up our layout and putting everything in Unreal first. Then we're bringing what we need into Maya to be able to do our animations and such. So this is already showing us that we getting rid of a lot of problems, because I've gotten some reports from some students that were having a really tough time to get their cameras from Maya to work in Unreal. And that again is the concept of perspective. By trying to force Maya into Unreal that way, you're kind of making your life a little bit hard. So if you create your camera in Unreal and bring it into Maya, you can duplicate this camera and it'll have the same lens settings and everything, and you'll have a pretty close or almost precise version in Maya. Which then, if you want to animate the camera, so I would suggest animating the camera in Unreal, because when you're creating your sequence, you will be able to add keys to the camera easily, and you animate your camera there. Let's say you don't want to do that. You want to say, I am going to animate this camera in Maya, and I want that to follow along in Unreal correctly. So there's two ways that I can suggest you can do it. So one thing is, and this is an old trick, what you do is you get your characters to have a bone that is a camera bone. And it's going to, just like I did with the pretzel, allow you to take the camera and link it to that one bone. And by doing that, you're going to have any animation on your character bring the camera movement to your camera. And that's an easy way of doing what I was explaining, what I'm trying to explain. That's an easy one. The other one is you could create a character that barely has any, like has maybe one triangle, and then it has a skeleton, and then that's what gets animated in Maya, and then you export that as a character, but it's your camera. It's a camera rig. But you need a skeletal mesh to have at least one triangle that's skinned, so just put it under the ground or make it a material that's transparent, whatever you want. Make a little cube, put it under the ground, and then make sure you have your hierarchy that will allow you to animate your camera so that everything is relative to this point here. And then you just treat it like any other character, but it's a camera character. I prefer the other one where I add a bone to or a joint rather, to the character, because that way you can have multiple camera shots set up on each character, and you can just bring in your camera shot information and just switch to it. There's many ways of doing this. But my preference is always to animate within Unreal when it comes to cameras. It's the place where you have your layout and you have everything set up. If you want to change things quickly, you can do that later in Unreal. You don't have to come back to Maya to make changes. God knows what kind of changes you've done to your environment. It can add up. This method that I'm showing you here is also handy because if there are changes that happen to the layout, you can always just move this point that we have in Unreal to the new location. You don't even have to load up Maya to make that change. You don't have to re-export anything. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this center root that we had in Unreal is now our 0, 0 in Maya. It's really not complicated. You grab everything like that, and then you go click here, and I'm going to press P. So now it's part of that. These guys are going to come along. Now I'm going to show you one of the issues that can happen. Our ketchup bottle and our camera is also going to be child of this node. And the second that I start moving this, because Maya by default, it might be double affecting the mesh because we just reparent it. Anyways, Maya for this, I don't know why the default is always world. For relative space mode, just put it to local and it will go correctly. It'll ignore whatever that transform is. And I'm going to just do that for all of them and just put them all local. And now you should be able to move this in peace, no problem. And then all you need to do is set this to 0 just for the position. And now we're now moved back to 0, 0. If I press F, it'll bring us here. This is 0, 0 in Maya. Life is good. So now at this point, you have everything you need to make your shot, because this is all the objects you need. You'd be able to move your camera wherever you need it and create new cameras, and you'd be able to export that through, like I mentioned, like positions from bones or from whatever method you want to do. You can create a specific camera, and at this point, obviously this mesh is just a skeleton with joints, right? So if I go to show the joints, you're not animating a skeleton. You're going to want something with IK controllers and all that stuff, right? You want to have your MVP at the very least to control this. This is just setting up a layout. So you would replace this character with your actual rig of this character, and the only thing you need to care about is the position of where she's standing. And then that would be that circle for the root that we usually have. That would be right here. This is the most important thing out of this whole character. So if I open this up over here, this emote headphones or transform node is the most important thing. You'll see that it has a root there. So then you're going to bring in the thing and just match position to that, and you're going to export your animation as is for that rig at this location, with the root being the parent here, and then that animation is going to have this offset, which means that in Unreal, if you place it where this reference point is, where the actor that is the skeletal mesh, if you place it exactly at where this is, it will have that, it will offset the character over here, because isn't that nice? It's really easy to do that. And you don't have to worry about anything. So like I mentioned, the node is going to come in with a -90 on the x-axis. That means it's compensating for Maya's y up, but everything else should be just fine. Your numbers should line up, your camera should be fine, and at this point in time, you can animate in Maya. Now, like I mentioned in the other parts of the video, you're using Maya to create your animation, you're exporting it, and you're bringing it into Unreal. And that's really what you're aiming for here. And this is a good pipeline where you're going to be able to get your shots done. Once that's done, you've brought in your animations and so on, you can maybe go in here and go add level sequence, and we'll call this Cine 01. And then this thing, it's off to the screen here. It's off the screen here. So I'm going to bring it over. At this point, you can even grab this camera that we had, and we can say add actor to sequence, or you could create. This is the fun part. See, now it sees it from this perspective, and it automatically it came here. So I'm going to just make this smaller. Working with one screen is kind of tough. Here we go. Normally I have two screens at least. So this is going to have that shot with this camera, and we have options for that we can animate the camera's focal point and all that stuff, and add keys here very easily. You can go to the transform part here and just go, this is, at this point it's more like a Adobe Premiere, where you're adding keys like this, and you have keys now for this thing, and maybe you can zoom out type of thing, and then say, okay, I want another set of keys here, and now we have this animation. And this is within these tracks here. You can start adding characters. You can say, okay, I want this character, and this character, add them all in here. Add actor to sequence, add current selection. There you go. So now they're here, and you can change what animation each one of them has. You have an animation section here, and you can edit it so that it. I'm having a little trouble with the Wacom. Okay, there we go. So it has. It's making a reference to the mesh, and it has its location where it's been placed, and then you have your animation here. So I think you can just go like this, and then add the animation that you are exporting from Maya relative to the 00, and you should be fine. For the most part, that's all you need. All right, so hopefully that helped you out. I know that we covered a lot of ground. Obviously, this video won't make you an expert in Unreal, but I'm hoping that if I've done this right, you're going to be looking at Unreal differently, and you're going to start seeing the value of approaching this differently, and you should have a much better time in Unreal. In fact, it's actually quite enjoyable to use Unreal because it has all this tech that makes everything real time, and the materials and the shaders are so robust that you can do so much stuff with that, and you can connect everything, all the animations. You can connect anything to animation so easily in Unreal. And I've done it in a couple of other videos where I had like an eyeball dilating, like the pupil was dilating, and that was being run by the animation inside of Maya, and that was being fed to the material properties that we had in Unreal. So if you're curious about that kind of stuff, that works for everything in Unreal. Any material, anything like that, it will work. So hopefully this helped you out. I really hope you're going to have an easier time now with Unreal. And I might consider, depending on comments and such, I might consider making a series where I go through everything in Unreal step by step, static meshes, how to do light maps, how to use the system that it has called Lumen for global illumination and reflections. how to deal with certain, basically Unreal is huge. There's a lot of stuff to cover. I've spent most of my time in the last couple of years just learning Unreal and all of its nuance, and even on the coding side, it's actually really interesting. It is a very complete package for 3D software. Anyhow, I might make another series depending on the comments for just stuff related to Unreal, where I cover as much ground as I can. Might be useful for some of you, actually for quite a few of you, and it should open up some options when you're looking for work at some point. Because if you having a good understanding of Unreal is good for the AAA industry type jobs, not necessarily for indie. But then you wouldn't be learning Maya either if you were looking at indie. Then mostly it's Blender and stuff like that. So, all right. So hopefully that helps out. Let me know in the comments what you think and if you want more of this.